I am honored to be with this incredible group of women. It is a very hard topic, a topic that you don't even want to talk about because you cannot believe that it is happening right before our eyes in our countries. And as we researched and talked to different individuals and learned about the atrocities of the grooming of these rape gangs that are happening here in the UK that was literally not even addressed for decades. And now we have some of these courageous women who are advocating for the victims and standing up for these girls that have suffered and been abused for so long. So I want to start with you, Ellie. You're a victim of this horrific, this grooming of these gangs. And your story is different than most, right? They literally come and say, oh, they were coming from broken families, these girls, they were being targeted. I mean, they've talked about over 250,000 girls in several decades that have gone through this process. Tell us your story.
I think this is the problem, though, when people talk about, I don't call them rape gangs because I think it really softens the blow of what torture we get put through. I call them rape gangs because that's exactly what they are. I think when people talk about rape gangs, they sit in, their first assumption is, very vulnerable, weak child, doesn't really know any different, comes from a care home, and I understand that in the majority of the cases, that is true. But there is different avenues to rape gangs and how they work. So, for example, I had a very, very good childhood. I was very, very fortunate. I had horses, I loved my education, and it was an off chance of a school relationship where my former partner's cousin was in a relationship with what turned out to be my main abuser. So it can literally happen anywhere, through any circumstance.
And tell us, Ellie, how did they approach you? How did they target you?
Well, I was at my partner's at the time quite a lot. They were pretty cool in the sense of they let me drink underage and they had a lot of parties, and my parents weren't really like that. So I spent a lot of time there. But it wasn't necessarily that my main abuser, would conversate. He'd give me looks that made me feel uncomfortable. But it was by off chance that I was going to give my friend a cigarette and I was put in the footwell of a car and I was missing for 4 days after that. And I was found in a takeaway.
How did your parents, during those 4 days, it must have been horrifying.
Well, my abuse went on from 2013 until 2018. My mum and dad, they used to try and get me to talk and tell them what was going on, but you have to understand that when you're a victim of rape gangs, you suffer with serious consequences and the threats that they give you. And I just wasn't willing to put my family through that, so I always stayed quite quiet about what was going on. I was quite angry and I released my emotions in different ways. But I never told them. It was actually the police that knocked on to my parents' house and told them that I was being raped.
How old were you?
So I was 13 until 17, 2013 until 2018.
Think about that. Think about your daughters. Think about your nieces. Think about your grandchildren. From 13 years old to 17 years old. Taken away their innocence. It's unfathomable. Penny's a very dear friend of ours, runs a very important women's group in America, Concerned Women of America. And I got to ask you here because in the US, we see this grooming happening, these rapes happening. This has been a huge issue that actually President Donald Trump has addressed and has tackled, has really taken directive action to find many of these missing children who have been part of these sex trafficking rings, in the case of America, coming from the border. Tell us your comparison, what you see, what we've done right in America, what we need to improve, and what advice you can give here in Great Britain.
Well, greetings from Concerned Women for America, members in the United States, and I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here and also for being willing to talk about this hard topic. And the fact that you're not willing to avert your eyes from something that's very dark means there's hope. means there's a chance to do something different. And, you know, the scourge of rape and criminal activity isn't just for one country, it's all over the world. And so Concerned Women for America has worked on the issue of sexual exploitation now for many years. We started in 1979, and we've seen different iterations of it. You know, you talked about President Trump. We've seen the crime numbers, just overall crime numbers, including rape, go down in the United States to the levels we haven't seen since 1900. Think about that. Since 1900. Well, why is that? It comes from the top. It comes from the leaders at the top saying, we will not allow this. You know, I worked when I was younger with an organization called Prison Fellowship, and I understood more crime issues. And one of the things I learned that only 2% of the population create crime or predators against the rest of us. And that number is pretty solid across humanity. And if you go after that 2%, you either imprison them or deport them. Shocker, crime goes down in your country, crime goes down in your cities. And the fact that President Trump has said, absolutely not, we're not allowing these repeat offenders to continue to do horrific things against people in their host country, we've got to stop it. We're seeing numbers go down. And so it really comes down to whether over 30 years' time in Great Britain, the leaders were not interested in taking on an issue that made them feel uncomfortable. What if in the US, Mercy, in the 1930s, we said we can't come after the mafia because they're Italian? Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. In the United States, in front of the Supreme Court, is a statue of Lady Justice. She's wearing a blindfold, and she's holding a scale. What is it saying? Justice must be blind. Must be blind. You don't get a free pass because of your community or anything about you. Because when you do this, other people are hurt. You cannot give a pass. So finally I'll say, Micah 6:8. What are you to do, O man? To do justice and love mercy. If you don't do justice, you can't love mercy.
And you know, Penny, I think one of the things that we've also talked about is, and we're seeing here in Great Britain, is that they've downgraded. So like if you're a 13-year-old to a 15-year-old, they downgrade like the rape, you know, conviction to something much lower because, you know, they're 13, 15-year-old and they could be in love with this older individual.
40-year-old,
yes.
50-year-old.
That is something that happens in states like California. Yeah. Talk to us about that.
Yes. So there is an issue with, and I feel like it's gotten worse in some ways and better than others. You know, initially when we started talking about sex trafficking, we realized that law enforcement just thought they were prostitutes. Like they're prostitutes. And somehow they didn't matter because they were prostitutes. Like, wake up, people. 11-year-old, 12-year-old, they cannot consent. Under the law, they are not capable. No little girl wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'll grow up to be a prostitute. No one wants that. And so as we have re-educated law enforcement in the United States, we have seen better outcomes. But you're right. The blue states that have the more lascivious view, frankly, of sexuality, I think it spills over into their view of crime, and they don't take it as seriously. One last thing, you mentioned the border. 300,000 children were trafficked across the border and went missing under the Biden administration. The Trump administration has gone looking for those children. We found about 150,000. We got 150,000 to go. We cannot leave one child behind, not one.
Claire, there's this guy. His name is Shabia Ahmed. He was convicted for 30 sexual offenses against children as young as the age of 12, drugging these children, grooming these children. These children were raped. He was sentenced to 22 years, has just been released after 14 years. I don't know about you, but I think they should castrate the guy. They should castrate these sexual predators who go after these innocent children. What is happening here in Great Britain? Why are they releasing these sick, twisted, demonic individuals back into society?
Well, the majority of the time it's the political will. They're using the excuses that the prisons is full. They're forgetting to realise that 13,000, 10,000 of the spaces in the prisons are full of illegal migrants. So there's 10,000 for starters. Now, what they're doing is they brought in an early release scheme. And they cherry-picked who they actually wanted to release into society. And paedophiles, grooming gang perpetrators, and rapists were put on that list. Now, we thought originally it was a decision made out of love and out of spacing. We then since find out that the ex-safeguarding minister, Jess Phillips, she knew this was going to happen. And her voice was, we will do risk assessments. Risk assessments on men who raped, tortured, and trafficked children as young as 11 years old. And she thought we could get a risk assessment and they would behave. A rapist will always be a rapist. A paedophile will always be a paedophile. I personally don't believe in the rehabilitation of a paedophile or a rapist. That is my personal opinion, and I'm standing by it. I have been lobbying, advocating, working with children of victims of grooming gangs and serial paedophiles and rapists for quite a long period of time now. And what I see is the lack of political will. However, we have seen parties like the Reform Party, like the Conservatives, who are fighting for children in this country right now. And there are people pushing back because they do not have the political will for our children.
Claire, tell us why you got involved.
So it's a really strange one, actually. My family member is a victim, but not of grooming gangs. I was helping out ladies, and I noticed that why did my family members, serial rapist, spend 24 years in prison, and then all of a sudden I need to stand up and make sure he stays in? And they kept him in. Then they released him. 3 months later, he reoffended. 3 months later, another child has been hurt, and I fought like mad. And I thought, that's it. I've had enough. I'm going to do everything in my power to speak to political parties, to stand on stages like this, to let people know what is happening in this country to our children, our future. So that is why I'm here. I just wanted to finish off. Last week, I went to my local council meeting, and we passed, the councillors passed, a motion so that my local area could be considered into the National Grooming Gang Inquiry. And that was by the Reform Party. And it took us years to get anyone to recognise what is going on in this country.
I'm gonna share with you something that's really shocking as well. We at CPAC, we're actually hosting our 4th annual International Summit Combating Human Trafficking in Washington, D.C. next week. Literally coming from CPAC, Great Britain, heading to D.C., where we will be gathering with many international leaders on this topic, on specifically human trafficking, which involves grooming gangs, rape gangs, all of this. It's all very intertwined. And one of the dynamics I found and Penny can attest to this, is that we believe at CPAC that this is a humanitarian issue. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue in the United States. When we have reached out to Democrats, we get little to no support on legislation to stop this. And that is, to me, horrible. So it is the Republicans, like you mentioned, Claire, the Reform Party, the Conservatives, who have said, we must protect our children. That should be a priority for every society. And so I go to you, Ellie, because you want to make sure there's no more girls that have to go through this. What has to be done?
Absolutely. I mean, my case being being reopened again, it doesn't faze me. The first thing that the police officer said to me when he reopened my case almost probably over 6 months ago now was, now your case is reopened, please don't talk about it in the public, because he knew fine well what I did. Well, I've got a message for that police officer. I would sacrifice my justice in a court of law to make sure that no other child in our country has to go through this, because my justice is our children being safe. Now, what we have to do, so I work very closely with Nigel Farage. I've done a few press conferences with him. I probably do his heading most of the time, but Nigel genuinely cares. And I have been around a lot of politicians begging for them to listen. And I can't tell you one politician that's listened apart from Nigel. Nigel offered to turn Parliament into a court. It was denied. The problem that we have right now in this country is a Labour government. Everybody can agree with that.
Why do you think, I mean, I was reading the statistics, you're talking about 20 years of just ignoring, more than 20 years of just ignoring these cases, of the police just putting it aside. Do you think they were involved? Who's been involved in this scheme?
I know for a fact that all services, all authorities are involved. Social workers, police officers, and I just want to make it very clear.
Social workers.
Social workers, yeah. I mean, look at Shabir Ahmed that's due now. Well, he's released, isn't he? Well, he had access to vulnerable children. He was working for the council. He had access to our weakest children, and he took that for granted. And what did they do? They looked the other way. It's all up and down the country, no matter where you go, you will find that social workers knew about it, police officers knew about it, and I want to make it very clear that it doesn't just stop at the age of 12. One of my abusers is serving a life sentence right now, and the person was 7. That's in the public domain. It goes a lot younger than you think.
And Penny, to Ellie's point, I mean, I think the average child who's being sex trafficked in the United States is 11 years old. Biggest consumers of kind of this human trafficking content on social media of children being raped are Americans. I mean, this is...
And also, we're the biggest purchaser of child abuse content in the world, which is so heartbreaking and disgusting to me as an American. But it won't stop until we're serious, until every single person is willing. You know, one thing, this is a little afield, but I think you'll understand, Mercy. When you believe in the unique dignity of every human life, when you believe that every child is sacred, then it spills over to everything you believe, right? And if you think that children are trash or in the way or not important, then I think you behave in various and sundry other ways. And so I believe as people of honor, we have no choice but to look at into the eyes of these little ones. National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the United States teamed up with a baroness here, forgive me, I don't remember her name, who started really talking about this issue earlier on in the 90s. And they found babies. And I won't put in your mind some of the things I had to learn about. But children, they're so young that they had to remove a diaper for abuse. That's the sickening world of this world. And you can sell a drug one time, but you can sell a human being over and over and over again. And that is the evil that is this way. It's all about money.
It's all about money, and it's just pure demonic. I just think it is as demonic as it can get when you're targeting these innocent children. You know, I think, Claire, you mentioned, you know, we've talked about this as Ellie did, about the social services being involved, the police being involved. What did it take for this finally to blow up in the faces of all these politicians? And why does the left, why do they not want to engage and stop this type of abuse?
I'm not going to take it away from victims and survivors, because they've been screaming and shouting at anyone who'd listen for many, many years. And there's many advocates out there, women who worked in sexual health clinics, journalists and politicians such as Anne Cryer and Sarah Champion, who lost their jobs for speaking up. In terms of, I think it was Elon Musk on the 1st of January 2025 when he tweeted, and it just blew up again. Yes. We've got many advocates, a gentleman called Raj and Mia, there's myself, there's many, Sammy Woodhouse. I could keep going on and on and on, Ellie as well. I think when it comes to the left, I have a theory, you'll have to excuse me on this one, but I tend to find that they will minimize anything to further their own cause. And if that means covering up children being raped, they will do that. Essentially, we are not worthy. We're just working class girls. And I'll give you an example that we were called, or the girls were called, things like child prostitutes. They were classed as replaceable. There's been many occasions when it would curl your toes if I were to explain from transcripts and the thousands of transcripts that I've read over the time of the things, the evil that has happened to our children in this country, and the fact that the left looked away and they simply just don't have the political will.
I think as well, though, just to add on to your degrading comments that we suffer, a lot of the comments that I received by my abusers, 99% of the time had white in front of it. So it was my skin colour. It was nothing. I didn't do anything wrong. I was a child. It was white trash, white slag, like you say, a child prostitute, and it's terrible. And I also think it blew up as well, going back on your point, with the inquiry. So there was a few girls that had left the inquiry because we were told, I was one of them, we were told when we stepped onto the victims panel that we were not allowed to mention the ethnicity of our abusers. It was uncomfortable. Now, I've done a lot of pieces on that, and then the woman that was running, now it was a Home Office and it was NWG Network, and Saba Kaiser, that was actually running the victims panel, was doing an article saying how the victims, talking about the ethnicity of a Muslim man abusing them, is hateful and divisive, and you can still find that article online.
Oh my gosh. And then you talk about in terms of these radical Muslims who encourage these quote unquote marriages as young as 13 years old for these girls. It's horrific. But Ellie, I want to ask you, I think one of the components is you want to be tough on the criminal, go after the pedophile, the sex predator, the sex trafficker. But there are the victims, as you mentioned, Claire. How have you healed?
I haven't. I think that's always a tough question because everybody sees me for, what I'm doing now and coming across as quite powerful and talking to you all about it, but nobody sees the days when you are drained, when you don't want to talk to anybody, your battery's completely died. I don't feel like you ever fully heal. It's just that I found my justice not in a courtroom, not with my abusers behind a dock. I found it by getting safety for other girls and boys out there, and I'll continue to do that for the rest of my life.
Penny, so it's we were talking about the left and something popped in my brain about the puberty blockers, because I think the left, really, there's no moral compass because they're willing to pump a kid with puberty blockers at the age of 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, is that part of it as well?
Well, I think it's also identity politics, right? That this need to feel morally superior and being and tarring anyone that disagrees with you with the term racist, right? I mean, they've overused that so much that it doesn't even have meaning anymore. There are real racists out there, but if the term racist is applied to anyone who disagrees with you politically, then it means literally nothing. And so,
Definitely.
And so it doesn't even stick anymore, right? And so, yes, I mean, again, it's sort of that, the idea that children are, they're whatever we say they are or whatever even they say they are. And you have that sort of right to determination. And there are people who think that an underage child should be able to consent to underage sex, that a 11-year-old can be in a relationship with a 40-year-old or a 6-year-old. I mean, that is a real thing that is being argued within sort of the mental health community. Minor-attracted persons sounds so much nicer than pedophile. And so they're reclaiming this name instead of saying, you are a criminal and you must go to prison. And by the way, we can set aside whether that a person can, I'm a Christian. I think that you can come to Christ and he can heal many, many things. But if you have hurt another person, all that can happen in prison. You can become a Christian and you be rehabilitated in prison and do work in prison. You just shouldn't get out. And it is the worst. That I will tell you, over years of study, I know that sexual predators are the most difficult to rehabilitate. That number is very, very low.
Claire, this man that should be castrated should be a Hakman. Pakistan doesn't want him. In fact, they said he's been spoiled by Britain. The British government, they're trying to close the loophole so that they can deport the guy. I mean, how many of these guys do we have to deport? How many of these yeah.
I couldn't put a number on it. I seriously couldn't put a number on how many. We did have an inquiry down in Rotherham, and it said there was about 1,400 victims, not perpetrators.
Wait,
1,400 in one tiny town.
1,400 victims.
Victims.
Wow.
With how many perpetrators? Times that by 84, 85 that we know of, and then the ones that haven't been reported either. I could not put, but I will tell you this. Every week, up and down this country, there are grooming gang perpetrators being sent to prison, including one last week. It's continuous.
What laws need to be changed? What has to be done?
Personally,
yeah.
if I was allowed to say that, I would give the death penalty to a paedophile. Personally.
So when we started the CPAC Center for Combating Human Trafficking, now in its 4th year, we've had a lot, thank God, a lot of successes from a legislative standpoint to help victims of human trafficking. And one of my favorite moments is while I was at work, CPAC had sent a request over to the president to pardon a human trafficking victim, someone who was actually put in jail, actually convicted as a felon because her human trafficker basically threatened her, pressured her, used her accounts for money laundering, and then she was caught up in this crime. And she's an advocate for human trafficking, Holly Nadel. So we put in that request, and I got a call from President Trump. I was filming one of the shows I do, and I keep getting this call from the White House, and I don't pick up. And finally I pick up, and they're like, the president needs to talk to you. I'm like, well, I'm kind of taping this show. And I was like, what am I saying? I'm like, yes, please put him through. So I'm telling the producers, I'm like, stop taping right now. And he gets on the phone, and this shows you the character of President Trump, where he said, this Holly Nadel, Mercedes, you know her? I was like, yes, sir. She was a human trafficked victim. Explain the situation. He goes, well, because you're asking for this pardon, I will grant the pardon for Holly Nadel. And I will say I was so humbled and honored that we can be part of really having this wonderful advocate for victims have a second chance in her life and start her life again. And we are so grateful for President Trump for doing that. And our goal is to continue to help get these pardons for these human trafficking victims who are caught up in these horrific situations. But I want to wrap this up with, what's your message to our audience here? What do they need to do? What is their call to action that they need to do to get this message out, to stop this insanity in this country?
My message would be, start getting comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. You have to keep the pressure on, because the minute the pressure drops is the minute it's going to go back away, and we cannot afford that as a country right now. Keep the pressure on, keep talking about it, and keep listening to the girls, because we've had many, many years of not feeling like we can lean on anybody. And I'm telling you from personal experience, you've no idea how much I've leaned on the public in my journey of speaking public about my experience, and it's been amazing. So please keep in support, keep talking about it, and really be prepared to get uncomfortable, because it's going to need to be done.
Penny.
Well, I wanted to say the same thing, and good for you that you're here this morning, but you've got to carry this message to others because you don't know how many people, our women, our ladies in the U.S. tend to be church ladies, and they're very comfortable in their pews. But you need to know, in order to do justice and mercy, you have to know. And so we deputize all of you to go forward and share the message, share Ellie's story, and to move forward in this country.
Claire.
So the government's first choice is to look after their country, it's the security of the country. Parents is the security and safety of their children. All the children in this country are our children, and we must safeguard them, look out for these people, speak to your children, have these uncomfortable conversations around men, and safeguard our future. They are our future. Thank you.
I really want to thank this incredible panel. You inspire us, really. You inspire us with your stories. You inspire us with your fight. You inspire us with your willingness to go public on all of this. And know that you have allies who stand with you as well. God's children are not for sale. And we have to never forget that. Thank you all, and God bless.